This podcast is for singers who have music in their soul and want to be in the spotlight. We are INVICTA Vox Radio.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of INVICTA Vox Radio. As always, we are your hosts, Mike and
Angie Lee.
And last time we told you guys we were going to do an episode about getting scrappy.
Yeah, like what you got to do when you have no money.
Yeah, because we see this all the time. We hear everybody come in, not everybody. It's not like
a lot of people.
But it's a pretty common thing, and it's a very real thing,
It's
right?
actually the biggest complaints I hear people make about not being able to pursue music is I don't have enough money to do this. I don't have enough money to pay for recording time or to pay for photographers or music videos or whatever else you can think of that you might need to pay for as an artist. And so I think it's one of the biggest stories or narratives people have in their mind that they come in, and it's one of those things that just holds so many people back. And so we need to talk about how we can get past that and work with a lower, investment of money in this. How do we work with somebody who doesn't have as much income to invest and have capital to invest in a music career?
Right, because it is a legitimate thing, right? Like things are expensive. Things in the industry are expensive.
Well, and you have to create content before you can actually start making money off of your content.
Right, and so to be able to create content, it does take...
You have to have capital.
Resources.
Yeah, so we have to start thinking
money.
about it. Yeah, just start thinking about it as resources instead of money, capital investment. Like, what is the resource that you can put into it to make it happen? And the funny thing is people think that the only resource they have access to make things happen is money, but there's way more than that. We're going to talk about like 8 different resources that we can dive into,
right? But
to help you pursue that.
Because that's where most people have been conditioned their whole lives, right? Like, hey, I give somebody money, they give me a candy, or hey, I pay someone money, they mow my lawn, or So typically what we see is an exchange of money for goods or services, right? That's what everybody kind of understands.
And hey, if you have the capital, if you have the money to just go all in, cool, good for you. Most people don't.
Right. The good thing about money, so this is what money represents, right?
And this is resource number 1, actually.
Yeah, you have to think about money as this. Money is a representation of every kind of resource, right? That's why money's so easy.
Yeah, it's not actually a physical thing. Money is not a physical thing. It's a representation of what we think something is valued as.
Right. It's just like the value marker for what you perceive something as. So, hey, again, this piece of candy is worth $2. So $2, exchange it over, everybody feels good, right? But it's an exchange of resources. So the amount of money, it's just like, okay, this represents anything, right? It can represent someone's time, someone's energy, all these things. But we need you to start thinking about things in other ways and how to present it to people to be able to get what you want.
How to use other resources besides money to get what you want.
Right, because everything always has to be a fair exchange of value. And that's what I really want people to start thinking of, is not an exchange of money for goods and services, but an exchange of value for value, right? So some of these 8 resources, and I don't want to... do you want to just run through
resources
real quick? We've thought of.
That we've thought of. And these are things that you may or may not have access to, but I guarantee you have access to at least a couple of them. And if the idea is that you amass enough resources that you can invest them into yourself and into your music or whatever else you may be pursuing in your life. But if you can invest more than one, you're going to be able to move the needle a lot faster, and you're going to be able to pursue things a lot more efficiently. And so the first resource, as we already mentioned, is money. If you have money, you can do a lot because you can then pay people to do things for you. You can move things faster that way. But again, this whole conversation is about people who may not have a ton of money to invest. So guess what, guys? We have 7 other resources that you can have at your disposal that have nothing to do with money that you can then invest. And we're going to move through them and talk about how that actually works and what that means. So number 1 is money. Number 2 is time. Number 3 is energy. Number 4 is desire. 5 is faith. 6, knowledge. 7, skills. And 8, connections. So we're going to go through them all now a little bit slower and talk about what it actually means to have a resource of time and how you can use that. So number 2 is time. So what does that mean?
So say you don't have a lot of money, but you have time. And when you have time, you can make things happen, but you have to understand it's going to happen slower than what you would normally think of it as, right? Because if you're exchanging time for something, then it's just going to eat up more time, right?
Well,
because you're putting that's the resource that you're putting into it. So if you don't want to, let's just take this for example. Say you're trying to do a songwriting class, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or you're trying to learn songwriting. Yes, you can pay somebody money and they'll teach it to you. You can go to a class, they'll teach it to you. It happens a lot faster.
And it expedites your results.
Right. Or you don't pay somebody. You go through a lot of trial and error and test things out. So you're putting your time into it to learn songwriting rather than money.
And it takes you a lot longer to do it, but you can eventually get there.
Right.
So somebody who may not have resource of time is someone who maybe is a parent of small children. Hey, we have some stay-at-home moms here at the studio, and they do not have a ton of time to burn, right? Or people who are in really high-end careers or not high-end, but very busy careers, and maybe you really don't have as much time on your plate versus someone who might be in high school or college. I know you guys think you're busy, but just wait. Or someone who's like post-college, but they're single and they don't have families. You know, that because once you add more people to your life, your game gets busier. So if you are a person who has a lot of time, and I don't mean the 6 hours you spend playing video games at nighttime, guys. I mean, you literally, if you take that away, the binge watching of Netflix, like all of that stuff, that doesn't count as time that is being used. That counts as time that you have, that you could invest in other things. You have flexible time and you have lots and lots of it. That's a resource that you can utilize. Absolutely.
Yeah. So the next is energy. Right? So if you if you don't have a lot of money and you don't have a lot of time, you got to put in a lot of energy.
Yes.
So it means you're going to have to pack way more into the amount of time that you actually have than someone who has more time to give, right?
Yeah, you got to turn the fire up hot.
And again, we're in this situation saying we don't have money.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because we're going to talk about this later. Like you can combine all sorts of these things.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't have money, don't have time, you got to take kind of the same route that you would with time, but because you don't have time, you have to get really intense and really focused with what you're doing. Again, going back to the songwriting thing, you got to be like lasered in and trying things and moving through it faster. You got to put in more energy each day.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what, like, we're not going to just kind of go mosey on into the music room and sit down with the guitar or sit down on your bed with your guitar and just kind of strum some chords for like several hours and maybe something will come to you. It's like you said, there's going to be a lot of intensity that you invest in that because your time is limited. And so you are going to turn up the fire tenfold and make sure you have energy that you can just pour into it when it's time to go.
Yeah. And that you made a really good point right there. In order to utilize energy as a resource, you have to be very clear on what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
Right. Because you can't just, we've talked about this before, mistaking action for progress, right? Like, oh, I'm doing a lot, but it's like not moving the needle. It's not moving you towards
because
what you want.
Because you're doing a lot of nothing.
Right. So if you're going to utilize energy, be very clear on what you're trying to accomplish so that way you can do it faster.
Yep. If you have a goal in mind, if you have a target, every time you sit down to work on your music, you're going to achieve it. But if you're just kind of walking in and meandering, that energy is not going to be a resource that you're really utilizing in that moment. So number 4 is desire. How is that a resource? How do you explain that as a resource or something that you can invest?
I have no idea. I'm just kidding. No, but that's
I know that's like so ambiguous. You're like desire. How is desire a resource?
No. I saw this in the beginning. I thought the same kind of thing. The first time I heard this, I was like, desire is a resource. What does that even mean? But really, this is actually one of the ones that's huge, right?
Well, that's because anybody who's actually trying to do something has desire.
But the more you ramp up that desire, okay, so it takes something from a casual interest to an obsession.
Yeah.
And as you become more and more obsessed, you start to think of things in different ways. You start to, it just like,
you see different loopholes. You see different paths that can shortcut your journey. And you can see like, you can just see better.
Yeah. And instead of, okay, I need an hour block to sit there and songwrite or to think of this, you're always thinking about it, right? And so,
obsession.
So if you have like 2 minutes on at a stoplight or whatever, you're thinking of new hooks, new riffs, new rhythms, new melodies, new lyrics, whatever it may be, right? And I just keep bringing this back to the songwriting because I want to stay on the same page with it so you can see how everything applies to this. But really, the more desire you put into it, the more scrappy you'll ultimately be, because again, your desire is so high that you're going to find every way possible for something to happen.
Absolutely.
So it's actually one of the most important ones.
I love that the idea of the obsession spectrum of this is kind of an interest to me, it's a hobby, to this is everything to me, it's my number one obsession. And the more obsessed you can become with what you are pursuing, the more likely you are to achieve it, because that means all of your focus is going into that thing, and whatever you focus on, you will manifest. And so that desire is what fuels that obsession. It's that just desire, that dream, that want, that need to obtain that, whatever that goal is, that target. And so that's how you can utilize desire. Are you turning this into an obsession? Are you turning it into something that you're singularly focused on, or are you letting it be a hobby? And I find this a lot, and I've fallen victim to this before too, where you have someone who's a very serious musician. They're like, yeah, I'm just not going anywhere. And it's like, yeah, you're not really obsessed with it though. Like, you're doing it for fun, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're frustrated because you're not getting the progress you want, then you're clearly not obsessed with where you're trying to go.
Well, and the thing is, you might actually be obsessed, but here's the next piece of the puzzle, the next resource that again is like desire.
Where it's kind of hard to understand.
But it's hard because it's hard to understand it. But once you do, you understand it's actually one of the most important ones.
Number 5 is
faith.
Yeah.
You have to have faith in yourself, right? As soon as you're like, well, I'm not making any progress. If you don't have the faith that you're actually going to make it to where you want to go, you give up. But if you do have faith and you're like, okay, I'm not making it to where I want to go, you'll either see it as, okay, I'm learning right now. I am progressing just in ways I can't see. Or, yes, I'm plateaued for a minute, but I'll break through this eventually. And it's all just part of this grand path to where I want to go.
Yeah. And to define that further, faith is a lot stronger than just belief. Oh, I believe something might happen. That's not like a knowledge of something happening, though. That's just a belief in something. But when you have faith in something, you truly have a knowledge of things that you cannot see, but you believe are true. And so for you, if you have that unfaltering faith in yourself, you can pretty much make anything happen.
Yeah, because you know it's going to happen.
You know
eventually.
It's going to happen. So I just wanted to define that. There's a reason why we say faith and not belief, because they are two very, very different things. They're in the same vein of it, but belief is kind of like the redheaded stepchild of faith.
Well, it's like the seed of faith,
it's
right?
the seed of faith. Yeah, that's better.
And then full blown faith, though.
Sorry, all my redheads. I love you guys.
Is you can see it. Like when we go back to visualization, we kind of talked about this in past episodes, like being able to visualize that future, right? And see it distinctly. And a lot of that actually comes from faith. And the more faith you have in what you're doing, it actually fuels everything else. It's actually what lights the fire behind everything else. And I'll talk to you guys more about creative ways to kind of combine some of these things in just a minute.
Well, and they play into each other, right? Like faith and desire totally fuel each other. And if you got both of those firing, whew,
right,
you can pretty much do anything.
Well, because if you don't have faith, the desire will burn out after a while. So that's why I said like faith isn't really ultimately what lights the fire under everything.
Yeah. So number 6 is knowledge. Why is knowledge important? Knowledge, I mean, everyone has knowledge at the tip of their fingers. So you could just go on YouTube, find everything you ever want. Not all of it is completely, not all of it's good, but not all good information, or should I say like relevant or actually, true. But there's a lot of information on YouTube.
But the thing is knowledge is very valuable still. That's
is,
why
absolutely.
there's information products on the internet, right? Because yes, you could go out and find everything. You could go out and research everything, do all the studies, go through all the courses. But the thing is people have already done that and compiled it together, right? And this
So
is
why
what
spend
an
all your
information
time doing
product
that?
is, right? And you can do the same thing. There's people out there that want just knowledge in a faster, more condensed, more streamlined way. And so if you have a broad base of knowledge in an area, you can give that. People are looking for that, right? So utilize that as a resource when you're trying to exchange things with people. Be like, hey, I know a ton about this and I can help you learn it. If that person's like, yeah, I do want, like, that's something I've been trying to learn for a while. And it's like, yeah, I can teach you all this. And then they'll give you something in exchange, right? This is kind of like a business negotiation that you're always going to be in. It's, I can give you this, but I want this in return, right? So it's this exchange back and forth.
Right. It's like hiring someone to, and this kind of goes into our seventh resource, but hiring a plumber to come and fix your plumbing instead of trying to figure out how to do it on your own.
Yeah.
Right. So they have the knowledge of how that works. And then number 7 is skills. So a lot of times you might have a very specific set of skills that's really going to be beneficial to somebody else.
I have a very specific set of skills. I will kill you.
Yeah, Liam Neeson does not sound like
I know. That was the worst. I don't do good impressions, that's for sure. I just always I think everybody thinks that. Anyway.
I do too. A very special set of skills. Well, no, because like think about the plumber thing. You know, you could probably go on YouTube and to get the knowledge, and then you may have the knowledge, but you do not have the skills.
Yeah.
To fix your toilet, you know? So at the end of the day, it actually is more time effective and cost effective to hire someone who has the knowledge and skills already to come in and fix your toilet. And so if that's why knowledge is so important, because if you know how to do something that a lot of people don't understand how to do, you can teach someone how to do it or explain to someone how to do it. It's a really cool thing to have that, like you were saying, that streamlined knowledge about something. And then skills to be able to execute on something that other people cannot do, and you're more efficient and quicker at it. People will trade with you. They'll pay you for that. Like, you can utilize that resource in so many different ways. Even for us, we hired a media team to do who has like knowledge and skills that we don't have to help us out with that, because we don't have the time to invest in that.
Or even in the beginning, it's like, hey, you know how to build websites. I don't know how to do that. We'll do trade, right?
Yeah.
So we'll give you voice lessons. And you can build
a website. Yeah. And we actually did that with our first website.
Right. And this kind of goes back to the example you gave in the last podcast, where you were like, yeah, my dad went and built sets for these things, or built things because he's a contractor. He knows how to build it. So your dad exchanged his skills for someone else's time and services for you to be able to record.
Yeah, he built stages, he built sets for musicals, he built recording studios. Like at every phase of my youthhood coming up through music, my parents didn't have the money, but my dad had that skill. And he also had the time. And so he took those two things and he invested it. And most people can't do that. Most people can't build things as well as my dad can. And so, and as quickly as my dad can. He's very, very efficient at it because he's been doing it for 30 years. And so that's a really good example of how can you have a special skill set that you can use, or a set of knowledge that you can use to trade with people or to give back to people, or even make extra money on the side. Okay, the last one is connections. Number 8 is connections.
Right. And this comes down to, hey, who do you know that can help you out by, one, they can give you something, or they're willing to give you something because you have a friendship with them or a relationship with them.
Right.
Or 2, like even in the case of Angie's dad, right? So she didn't benefit. She benefited from her connections, right? Because it's not like she knew how to build.
No.
She knew her dad who knew how to build, and he was willing, because of the relationship that they have together, to go and build things for then her to get recording time or lessons or whatever it may be, right? So that was actually your connection that led to those things that you were able to get.
Right. So that's definitely a set of connections you can think about. And then you can also think of it as a networking type of a thing too. Like, who do you know in the industry?
Sure.
Who can give you a leg up? Who can help you meet the people that you want to meet? How can you make those connections? And so you might already have some of those connections, or you might not at all. And that's okay, but kind of think of that. Is that a resource that maybe you have access to that you haven't been using? How are you going to network to have those connections that can help expedite your journey?
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's tie some of these together.
Okay, so let's say that you want to record music, right? You want to record something. So you're trying to figure out, how do I get recording time with a producer?
And we're going back to the scenario of, I don't have money. I don't have the first resource, which is money.
Right, because if it's like, I have money, well,
You
easy
can
enough, right?
Just pay for anything.
But even if you don't have as much money as what they're asking for, think about ways to combine some of these things. Like, I know for a lot of producers, right? Because there's a lot of them that are up and coming. They're trying to build up their portfolio, or however you would describe it, right? Some of these younger producers, So they're looking for someone to help break their career.
Yeah.
And so this is, I think, where you have to have passion, or not just passion. Passion is probably one of it, but that falls into desire, right? But really, if you have faith, time, and energy, right? And that's all you have, right? And most people have that. And you've really like developed your craft. Like, you're not messing around anymore. You've dug in, you've learned how to do all these things. You're crushing the game because you're so invested in it, and you're really putting forth the time to like build your skills. Now you go to that producer and you paint the vision for them. Right. You say, this is where I'm going to be. And when that producer sees that fire in you, and sees that you're actually backing it up through your effort, through your time, and you're really digging in, then they start to develop a belief in you. And if they see that there's a potential there for them to get some credit on the back end, right, then they're probably willing to do some kind of a negotiation. To
negotiate points.
Some kind of a deal where it's like, I'll take points instead of just straight up cash right now, because I don't need the money right now, but I'm willing to take the chance on you to develop something, so we come up together.
That actually happened with my band, right? We actually signed a recording contract, and our producer took points off the back end. And so we had to come up with some money to get, to pay for some basic expenses, but it wasn't nearly what it would have cost. And so that's definitely something that you can consider negotiating. And the way you prove that is, like you said, maybe with faith and energy and time and willingness to put in, and I think the desire plays into that as well. Yeah. Showing somebody that that's all that you want, and that you have that singular obsession. I think that's a really powerful thing. And so, that's a really good example to illustrate how we can kind of combine some of these resources to get where we want to go. We kind of talked about knowledge and skills already. Like, do you have a specific set of knowledge and skills that other people would find appealing and want to trade with you? So we just use the recording studio scenario where someone wants to invest in you because they see, all of the beautiful things that you're putting together, and they believe in you. But then what if somebody wants to give you recording time because, like you were saying with my dad, he can go out and build their recording studio for them, and they're willing to just trade straight up for knowledge and skills. And so, dad goes in and builds the recording studio. They give me recording time. It's an exchange of knowledge and skills. And so be thinking, like, what are those things that you can do? Everybody has something. We just haven't used it yet.
Yeah, and you just have to be creative in how you're thinking about it too, right? Like, let's say you go in for trade and you're a hairdresser. Yeah. Right? But the producer that you want to work with is a guy. And it's like, guys still need haircuts, right? So it's like, hey, I could give you haircuts for this, but I could also give your wife or girlfriend
I was just going to say, if he has kids or whatever, like, hey, free hair color.
but again, don't just throw that out there. No. The more that you stack on top of each other, again, paint this vision for where you want to go, where you see yourself. Get other people to believe in your vision as much as you believe in it, and it'll open up a lot of doors. Right. But don't just, like, people get too narrow-minded and just too like tunnel visioned. And that's really what is kind of like the opposite of Scrappy, right? You can only see one avenue. To be Scrappy, you have to see everything that you can trade for something else. You have to dig, and you have to not think about what resources don't I have, but what resources do I have, and how can I utilize those to ultimately get me to where I want to go.
Well, and I think that brings us to the question, right? And it's kind of what you just said, but there's kind of a duality to it. So what I want you guys to consider is, what resources out of these 8 resources have you been using already? And what are some of those resources that you haven't yet utilized because you didn't even consider them as a resource? So I'll list them for you again. Money, number 1, money. 2, time. 3, energy. 4, desire. 5, faith. 6, knowledge. 7, skills. And 8, connections. Which ones are you already utilizing? Which ones are you inherently maybe using already? And then the big question, like Mike just said, is what are the ones that you're not? Where have you not even considered that maybe faith is a resource, or skills are a resource, or connections are a resource? Energy, I think, is always one that is like, what? Energy and desire.
Right.
So which ones are you not yet utilizing, and how can you start utilizing them immediately? Maybe you have them and just didn't realize it. So what are you utilizing already? What have you had already that you're using? And then what do we need to add to that toolbox that you have access to that you haven't been using yet? And we want you to go to your journal, write it down, leave a comment on YouTube, and make sure you declare that, because let's get you moving on how to get scrappy with these 8 resources instead of being pigeonholed into, I can't do it because I don't have money. That's just a story. It's just a narrative. You have to get scrappy, but it's absolutely possible.
Well, and with that, as always, everybody, if you like this episode, if you found it helpful, please share it up, like it up,
subscribe it up,
do smoke signals, send up the bat signal, but just let people know about it, so that way you guys can help us grow this podcast and we can help anybody who needs it. All right, everybody, until next time, peace.